The bell tolls at midnight. Greetings. I'd like to welcome all of my midnight marauders. Come on in, get comfy, and lend me your imagination. Have you ever heard of art coming to life? Well, Belle probably never suspected that a sinister drawing meant as an innocent joke to scare her adolescent niece, and two small sons would backfire in the most terrifying way. I call this midnight tale the Rubba Band Man. The burning July sun gave way to an unbearable evening, and Belle's little apartment felt sweltering. You could probably fry an egg on the kitchen floor. She opened the windows and placed a squeaky fan in front of it, hoping to catch a breeze now and then. Belle was babysitting her niece Carol, and her two boys Pico and Gunther couldn't have been happier having her around to play video games and eat junk food with. Just 2.5 hours later, they were all passed out on the sofa, and one by one, Belle gently escorted them to their bunk beds, leaving the blankets at the foot of the beds because it was just too hot to cover them up. Belle's husband, Baxter, finally made it home. He dragged through the door, tired and hungry from a long work shift at Hillcrest Mortuary. He absolutely hated having to transport the dead on a regular basis, but he always said it pays the bills, so he never complained much. Belle washed her hands and proceeded into the boiling pot of a kitchen with yellow lemon-printed wallpaper that peeled behind the stove, probably due to the heat. She whipped up 3 scrambled eggs and microwaved the remainder of the steak that she and the kids had for dinner to make Baxter a plate. As he waited, he insisted on telling Belle stories of his deceased passengers that accompanied him throughout the day. He detailed how they expired and their particular circumstances, how they looked, and even how they smelled. Belle was always there to lend an ear and also be a voice of positivity and reassurance when she was able to sense that Baxter was unsettled by his macabre day-to-day. Baxter finished his meal around midnight and proceeded to the shower before he headed to bed and was fast asleep and snoring loudly. Belle was slightly more restless as she sat at the dining room table, sweating from the heat and finishing her 3rd shot of bourbon. "Ah, I needed that," she sighed. The next day the kids were up early. Belle could hear them in the living room playing their video game and all but cursing each other out over who cheated and whose turn it was. Belle slowly raised her head off of the pillow in the direction of her husband's empty side of the bed. He had already made it up and out the door on his way to work. Guess he didn't want to wake her. "This apartment feels like an oven," she exclaimed. She'd quickly made up her mind that she would pull the rowdy kids away from their video game and take them to the park to escape the heat of the apartment. She sat up in bed and realized her eyes kept moving. She slowly stood up, and the room was moving too, or so it felt. She painstakingly made her way to the shower and got the wake-up call of a lifetime. "Holy spit, no hot water," she exclaimed. After dancing around in a cold shower like a crazy person for a few minutes, she jumped out, grabbed a towel to wrap around her, while the water and dangling hair in her face were fighting for position to obstruct her eyesight like a basketball point guard on game night. "Kids," she yelled from the bathroom, "get dressed. We're going to the park." Belle would rather take them to a hot park than boil all day in a tiny, even hotter apartment. Belle got the kids piled into the back seat of the car, and she drove them to a little mom-and-pop shop that sold burgers, fries, snacks, and milkshakes. The kids were excited at the idea of having a little dinner for breakfast, so Belle ordered some burgers, and to the park they went. Belle and the kids had a lovely time at the park, and, as was Belle's intention, there was no better way to tire out energetic kids than junk food and running around at a park all day. After several hours, they returned home, relaxed and ready to wind down until the apartment cooled off a bit. Just as she thought, as soon as they got settled, Pico and Gunther both began to nap at opposite ends of the sofa. However, Bay's niece Carol was far from tired and began to pick Bay's brain about any and everything her 12-year-old mind could think of. "Where did you buy that?" Carol asked as she pointed to an old figurine statue of an old man with prayer hands that sat on an old rolling cart that Bay kept her tea canister on. "I bought it years ago from a thrift store, Carol," Bay replied. Before Bay could grab a glass out of the kitchen cabinet, Carol asked, "Can you draw me a picture of it, Auntie, please?" "Okay, but only if you take a nap like your cousins so I can have a little me time," said an annoyed Bay. Carol agreed. Bay poured Carol a cool glass of water. Then she went and sat in the lazy boy chair next to the coffee table and fell fast asleep in less than 3 minutes. Bay walked over to the dining room table and grabbed her notepad lying near the fruit bowl and started scribbling out some hideous muscular figure of a dark-skinned man with a wild afro and dark red eyes. She jokingly wanted to scare the daylights out of Carol and the boys, just for a kick or two, you know. Around 4 p.m. later that day, the kids woke up, all within a few minutes of one another, and Carol asked, "Auntie, did you draw the picture of the praying man?" "Of course, there it is in the bowl on the dining room table," Bay responded. Bay waited for a frightened reaction from the kids, but much to her surprise, they laughed and expressed how cool they thought the picture looked instead. Carol even asked for Bay to draw horns on the man's head, which she reluctantly did. Bay stared at the drawing for a few seconds and kinda got the creeps, but shrugged it off. She tossed it back into the bowl on the dining room table and didn't even give it a second thought. Later that night, with the kids asleep, Bay's husband, Baxter, made it home. He ate dinner and showered as usual before retiring to bed. Everything seemed ordinary, yet that night, more than any other night, Baxter seemed a little uneasy about a deceased passenger he had transported earlier in the day. He explained to Bay he heard that the man wasn't well known and was described as a very unapproachable loner. He even added that the man wasn't too pleasant to look at either. The unsettling tone that Baxter conveyed while speaking about the man caused Bay to find herself being creeped out just hearing about him. They both shook off their feelings of unease and went to bed. Bay tossed and turned as usual, before somehow finding herself floating 3 feet off the ground, down the hallway of an abandoned high school in broad daylight. She was floating in slow motion, past large, seemingly two-way hallway windows that she could not see out of. Suddenly, she heard a deep rumbling voice say, "I'm going to get you." In disbelief as to what she was experiencing, she turned around to see who or what the hell said that, and much to her surprise, realized that it was the man from her drawing in the flesh. He glared at Bay, floating just inches behind her with his arms outstretched, trying to grab her. Bay's heart nearly leapt out of her chest as she screamed in terror, but no sound passed her lips. She began navigating through hallways, crashing through the glass doors. Weirdly, the crashing glass made no sound and seemed to break away in slow motion. It became her understanding that if she made one wrong turn and became trapped in one of the classrooms, he'd catch her. Suddenly, the faint sound of music began to echo throughout the abandoned high school building. The song began to grow louder and louder, until it steadied in Bay's ear. Her eyes widened, and her face took on a confused, yet still terrified expression as she realized that she recognized the song. It used to play on the radio when she was a child. Though playful and soulful, in this setting it was chilling and terrifying. Hey y'all, prepare yourself for the rubber band man. You've never heard a sound like the rubber band man. You're bound to lose control when the rubber band starts to jam. I must have died in my sleep and somehow ended up in hell, she thought in her mind. She couldn't focus, but still on her trail was this demon with outstretched arms that now flailed and growled just inches behind her, desperately trying to grab hold of her with the foulest smell of death one could ever imagine. Suddenly, she made a wrong turn and trapped herself in a classroom. Fearing that she had forsaken herself to this demonic entity, she closed her eyes and braced for her fate when a loud ringing bell alarm sounded and jolted Belle up from her bed, only to see Baxter smack the alarm off with his hand and turn to kiss her good morning. He looked up at Belle standing near her side of the bed and turned the light on. He could immediately tell something was seriously wrong as Belle stood there wide-eyed and shaking, trying to make sense of what happened. Baxter rushed over and wrapped his arms around her ever so tightly. "Babe, what's the matter? What's going on?" Belle remained silent and unable to move. Attempting to mask her fear, she made up a story about a leg cramp while wiping the tears from her eyes and massaging her calf. Knowing what Baxter will be dealing with at his job in little over an hour, there is no way that she wanted to add to his stresses. The moment Baxter leaves, Belle tears into the dining room, picks up the drawing. She looked at the hellish drawing, unable to believe that she let something so silly invade her dreams and manifest into a nightmare. "Unbelievable," she exclaimed to herself before making her way to her closet and shoving the drawing in a moving box. The morning was slow and blistering. Belle took the kids swimming at Brookdale Park and kept a super close eye on all three, even though the lifeguard was doing her job, watching everyone in the pool attentively. Belle's mind raced, and she began to dread what was to come. She was dreading the night and what just might be waiting for her in her sleep. The day progressed, and back at the house, the kids wanted to draw, but she found herself not interested. "Where is the picture of the dark man with horns?" Carol asked. "I threw it away," Belle replied immediately. "Why?" Carol asked. But before she could get another word out, Belle changed the subject to ice cream. Soon everyone was happy, enjoying mint chip ice cream and watching the Disney Channel. The evening rituals of dinner, putting the kids to bed, listening to unsettling stories from Baxter about the dead, were all done, and everyone was asleep, except Belle. Truth be told, she was terrified to fall asleep, not knowing what awaited her dream state. Everything seemed so real, so she was gonna stay up and sip a little coffee for as long as her eyelids would allow. 2 cups of coffee later, she found herself standing in front of her childhood home, dancing in the front yard with her sisters. They were playing double dutch when out of the corner of her eye, she saw a strange dark man in a ball cap walking past her house in slow motion. Slowly, his eyes became fixed on hers, and hers on him. She fell into a trance-like state and slowly started to follow him as he walked slowly by and up a now dark street. Out of sight of her sisters, the man turned back towards Belle's direction and began power walking towards her at full speed. Immediately his trance broke, and Belle was able to see his red eyes through the glasses, and she was chilled to her bones upon hearing him say, "I'm going to get you." Belle turned to run, only to realize that she was moving in slow motion, and with each step she took, he was 5 steps closer. Within a few steps he had caught up to her, arms outstretched just as he reached out his filthy clawed hand to grab her. She heard a beeping from the trash truck outside her window, and her own voice whispering, "Just breathe." Her eyes opened slowly, and she realized that she was sitting up in bed with clenched fists and sweat pouring down her face, as she'd been holding her breath during this terrifying nightmare. "What the hell is happening to me?" Belle yelled. "More importantly, why is this happening?" Belle jumped up from the bed, stormed to the closet, retrieved the monstrous drawing from the moving box, and scowled at it. "You go to hell," she exclaimed, before she promptly ripped it in half before throwing it in the trash. She went about her day with the kids, trying to shake this incomprehensible nightmare that had begun taking a toll on her life. Although not superstitious, nor believer in demons or creatures of the night, Belle couldn't find any other explanation for what was happening to her while in a dream state. The next night, Baxter got off early, and the kids were still up watching a Netflix movie, eating popcorn. Baxter greeted Belle with a kiss and asked her to accompany him into the kitchen to talk. Baxter told her about the dark, deceased male passenger that had made him feel so uncomfortable transporting, the same one that was now stalking Belle in her dreams. "Babe, did you know they went to clear out that man's home? When they arrived, they found photos of 7 missing women in his bedroom drawer," Baxter said. Also, a foul stench led authorities to uncover bones buried in the basement dirt floor. Baxter continued, revealing to a shocked Belle. "They called him the Rubba Band Man because he worked in a rubber band factory and he would play that song constantly," Baxter extolled to a surprised Belle, whose heart now rested in her throat. Belle couldn't keep this secret nightmare to herself anymore, as she now realized that this Rubber Band Man must have been the man haunting her dreams. She broke down, crumpling into Baxter's arms, while crying like a baby as she told him about the drawing and the dark man that haunted her in her sleep. There, everything will be okay, honey," Baxter reassured Belle. "He'll have to come through me first." She felt comforted and secure there in Baxter's arms, and soon it would be time to retire for the evening, and wouldn't you know, as always, the kids and Baxter would be sound asleep within the hour. Belle decided to snuggle up next to Baxter, leaving the nightlight by her nightstand on. Belle mumbled under her breath, "If the spirit of this monster thinks he can follow my husband home and manifest himself through a drawing to get me, then he's got a fight on his hands." No sooner than those words were spoken, Belle must have drifted off to sleep and suddenly found herself at the park, right down the street from her childhood home. Only this time was different because both Pico and Gunther were with her. They were both playing on the swings when all of a sudden, the sky turned dark and black clouds began to move within seconds. She'd seen this terror play out before, so she quickly grabbed Gunther off of the swing, and as she held out her hand for his older brother Pico to grab onto, a black, decaying, powerful hand burst through the sand, and she heard, "Hey y'all, prepare yourself for the Rubber Band Man. You've never heard a sound like the Rubber Band Man. You're bound to lose control when the rubber band starts to jam." Belle snatched Pico by the arm as quickly as she could see the top of a decaying, worm-filled forehead coming up through the ground. Time was running out. He's coming. Not only was this bastard coming for Belle, but now was coming for her children too in this nightmare. Belle turned with a mighty spin, both kids clinging to her as she held onto them with all of her strength. Somehow the Rubber Band Man was right behind her as she fought to trek up the hill to her childhood home in slow motion. With every step he'd managed to take too, but she could never allow him to catch her. Her children's very lives were at stake, so she struggled uphill as if she were trudging through quicksand, with him right on her heels. As soon as she made it to the sidewalk, she put the boys down and yelled, "Run! In the house!" No sooner than Belle stepped one foot on the sidewalk, an ice-cold clawed hand grabbed her arm and growled, I'm taking you to hell with me.